Okay, magandang gabi po mga katipon sa Pilipinas. Ito po ang ating katipunan. Muling sumasa inyo mga tagapakinig upang magbigay ng mahalagang impormasyon, magbigay liwanag, at higit sa lahat makinig sa inyong mga daing at kuro-kuro hinggil sa mga problemang patuloy na nagpapahirap sa ating kalagayan at kabuhayan. Sa susunod na 2 oras, sisikapin po namin ipaliwanag ang iba-ibang bahagi ng ating ekonomiya at ang mga mabibigat pang local and international issues na may malaking epekto sa ating buhay at kinabukasan. Ito po ang inyong katipon na si Butch Valdes. Kasama natin din ng aking co-host na si Itos Valdes. At ang mga iba pa natin kasama sa katipon sa Save the Nation Movement, Philippine LaRouche Society, at ang Partido Politikal ng Katipunan ng Demokratikong Pilipino. Narito po kaming lahat na nag-aanyaya sa inyo na makibahagi sa ating talakayan sa pagsusuri ng mga kasalukuyang problema at paghahanap ng kaukulang solusyon. Okay. Magandang gabi po, bayang kong Pilipinas. It's been some time at pasensya na po kayo kung minsan na di natin gagawa ang ating paglabas sa mga iba-ibang mga linggo. Pero kung minsan naman nagkakaroon tayo ng pagkakataon dahil medyo busy po tayo at ito pong schedule natin ngayon ay hindi pa maayos, no? Pero ngayon, pinilit natin na makapanayam kayo dahil meron po tayong pag-uusapan na mahalaga at meron tayong panauhin mamayang konti. Isa po siyang kandidato ng pagkasenado sa bansang Amerika. At hindi lang yon, kandidato po siya sa isa sa mga pinakamalaki at pinakaimportantong estado sa United States, sa New York State. No? At mamaya po makakapanayam natin yung magaling na ating associate sa LaRouche International na si Diane Sare. No? Andito po ang ating co-host, babigyan natin ng pagkakataon na mag-hello po sa inyo.
Hello muli sa lahat ng mga kasama natin dito sa Ating Katipunan. Again, it's good to be back here Sunday night live at kasama po kayo lahat. Again po, tulad ng sabi ni Chairman, minsan nagkakaano kami sa schedule. So medyo challenging po yung ating mga regular na broadcast. But we aim to be back soon again, broadcasting here on Ating Katipunan every Sunday night on a regular basis. Yun lang po. It's nice to be back and hello to all of you again. Sige po, Chairman, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. This past day, syempre, inaantabayanan natin palagi ang mga anunsyo ng President-elect Bongbong Marcos tungkol sa kanyang mga iba-ibang mga plano at pinapakiramdaman po ng mamamayan ngayon kung saan ba, ano bang direksyon papunta ang ating darating na administrasyon at nakikita po natin, depende yan sa kanyang mga ina-appoint na sa kanyang gabinete, no? Whoever he appoints in his cabinet more or less gives us an idea where his administration is going to go, no? Anong direksyon ang susundan niya. At nakita na po natin yung kanyang mga economic team, no? Na nagsasabi sa atin na kung ito yung economic team na ilalagay niya, gusto sabihin, ipagpapatuloy lang yung mga patakaran pang-ekonomiya ng mga nakaraan administrasyon. Nagkaroon lang ng konting pagkaiba yung dating administrasyon ni kay Duterte tsaka kay Noynoy Aquino. Dahil dito kay Duterte, nakita natin nagbuhos siya ng resources ng likas yaman at yaman ng bayan para gumawa ng maraming mga bridges, skyways, roads, highways at mga airports na tinuturing mga infrastructure projects. Dito po sa nakaraan 5 years na ginawa ni Presidente Duterte, 5-6 years, ay mga infrastructure. Pero aking pong komento dyan, nandyan na po yung infrastructure ng paggawa ng kalye, bridge, airports. Pero bakit po mukhang nakaligtaan yung infrastructure sa energy, sa paggawa ng kuryente? No? Bakit po yon hindi niya pinasukan? At dito din sa tubig, iniwan niya po yan, ang negosyong yan, iniwan niya po sa mga oligarko. At hindi niya pinasukan at hindi man siya gumawa ng paraan para maibaba niya ang halaga ng kuryente at ng tubig. Sa buong 6 na taon, ni 1 sentimo po, wala siyang naibaba dyan. Ngayon, dito sa darating na administrasyon nagdadasal po tayo, nanalangin po tayo na sana bigyan ng atensyon ito dahil ito ang tunay na malaking pagbibigat na pasan ng mga pamilyang Pilipino, ang kuryente, ang tubig. At hindi lang po ang mga pamilyang Pilipino ang pumapasan nito. Pati na rin ang mga kalakaran, pati na rin ang mga negosyo, no? Pati na rin ang mga businesses that are suffering from the burden, the heavy burden of power and water, no? Kanya po ang daming investors, both foreign and local, have been complaining that they can't come into the Philippines because we have among the highest cost of power in the world, no? For doing business. Yan po ang isa sa malaki dapat bigyan ng pansin ng ating Pangulo ngayon. May dadagdag ka, Itos?
Yes. Gusto ko lang again to add to ang sabi ni Chairman. What the present administration or the incoming administration is facing actually is more dire than previous administrations because of the nature of what is happening around the world also. Alam mo naman sa Pilipinas, sometimes we tend to look inward and problema lang natin, but we have to see how the world events are affecting us. And one of the things that Chairman mentioned also is yung alarming rise of prices on everything, inflation. We seem to be entering a stage of hyperinflation. Prices of goods are rising almost weekly, diba? Yung oil lang, tapos lahat. So, ngayon, I don't know kung ano yung plano nitong bagong presidente natin, Vice President and the administration and the cabinet. Pero based on his choice niya po sa mga, lalo na yung economic team niya sa kabinete, hindi po kami ganun ka hopeful na medyo ano kami, na dismaya kami sa napili niya. You have the usual suspects, kumbaga. You have Ben Jokno, you have Medalla, and Balikasan, I think. Oh. So these are the same people that have been in the past administrations. And from the same club of the free trade, speculative, and group of people that have been running the economy or are told to manage the economy. So we don't see any. As of now, we don't see any purposeful direction towards what should be. Sabi nga ni Chairman, na-mention niya that we were very disappointed in the past, the outgoing administration, President Duterte, because while he showed flashes of the intent to change and to move towards a different direction, hindi niya po nagawa or hindi niya ginawa. Para po siyang urong-sulong. Granted po, nangyari po yung COVID, nangyari po yung lockdown, which affected the whole world. Ngunit, his solution would have been the solution that the KDP had been proposing for the past decade already. Articulo 12 and renationalizing all the energy sector, repealing EPIRA, and even the oil deregulation laws, everything that we were told to do post 1986. So far, based on his economic team na nilagay niya dyan, or who are selected, who are supposed to be selected by the president, hindi po kami excited with the direction. Lalo na po with what's happening around the world in terms of it's looking like hyperinflation. Yun lang po, Chairman, that's my comment.
Yeah. Yung hyperinflation na sinasabi ni Itos ay ibig sabihin yan, lampas-lampas sa ordinaryong pagtaas ng bilihin. No? Inflation means tataas ang bilihin. Ngayon pa lang, nagbabadya ng magtaas ulit ang mga oil companies ng mahigit pag 2 o 3 piso sa diesel at ganyan na rin sa gasolina. Alam nyo po, pag tumataas ang halaga ng fuel, no? Yan po ang spark na nagpapataas na rin ng lahat ng bilihin, lalong-lalo na po ang ating kinakain. Kasi ang mga gulay, mga isda at mga karne na kinakain po natin, hindi lang dito sa Metro Manila, kundi sa iba-iba pang lugar, ay hinahatid ng mga trucks, no? Na mga trucks na gumagamit ng gasolina at diesel. Siyempre, pag tumaas yan, tataas din ang halaga ng bibilihin natin. At nagkakaroon yan ng tinatawag na multiplier effect. Hindi lang porque 2 piso ang tinaas ng gasolina, ang itataas din ng pagkain 2 piso. Hindi po ganyan ang nangyayari. Nagkakaroon ng multiplier effect. Yung 2 piso, pagdating sa pagkain, naabot na ng 20 o pagbili mo sa palengke. Ganyan po nangyayari ang effects ng sitwasyon natin. At nakakatakot po. Kung ako yung nandito sa administrasyon ngayon, talagang kikilabutan ka dahil ang problema ang haharapin po natin ay napakalaki. Isa, dahil pinatay natin ang ating kakayanan mag-produce ng pagkain. Lahat ng ating kinakain halos ay inaangkat po natin. Ang ating bigas, inaangkat natin. Dito sa rice tarification law, binuksan po natin. Anong ginawa natin nung binuksan ng rice tarification? Pinatay natin ang ating kakayanan mag-produce ng rice. No? At hindi lang ngayon, but noon pa nangyayari na yan. Pumapasok tayo sa pag-aangkat. At ang pag-iisip ng mga ekonomista natin noon at ngayon, kasi mas mura ang mas mura ang pag-angkat kaysa pag-produce ng rice dito. Kaya mas mabuti mag-angkat tayo para ang pagbenta ng rice hindi masyadong malaki. Ano pong nangyayari ngayon? Yung pong pinatay natin ang kakayanan ng ating mga magsasaka sa pag-produce ng rice, yung pong pinag-i-importan natin, ayaw na nilang mag-import. Katulad ng Vietnam, Thailand, ayaw na nilang mag-export sa atin. Bakit? Kasi sinesave nila yung kanilang pagkain para sa kanilang mamamayan. Ngayon, kung pipilitin mong bumili, napakamahal na. So, saan ngayon yung mga magagaling natin ekonomista? No? Isa pa, hindi tayo pumasok sa pag-produce ng fertilizer. Noon pa, sinasabi na po natin, no? Dekada 1990s pa, ang inyong pong lingkod, nagpipilit alos, pumasok tayo sa development of a fertilizer industry. Ayaw natin, lahat ng pamahalan, hindi pumasok dyan. Bakit? Mas madali kasing mag-angkat kaysa magtayo ng fertilizer industry. Besides, mahal na yung kuryente, kanya ayaw magtayo ng mga tao ng fertilizer industry. Ginawa nating mahal dahil sa EPIRA. Ngayon, yung paggawa ng fertilizer, hindi natin kinaya. Okay? Anong nangyari? Because the fertilizer now has reached by almost 300%. Paano ka ngayon magtatanim ng palay o kung ano man ang titatanim mo, masyadong mahal na. Hindi ka man ikaw yung magsasaka, hindi ka makabili ng fertilizer para magtanim. At pag makabili ka, anong mangyayari? Pagbenta mo, napakataas na. Yan ang nangyayari sa atin. Kung ikaw yung nasa gobyerno ngayon, kikilabutan ka. Dahil we might face different levels of hunger all the way to starvation. And when this comes, for sure, we will have peace and order problems. Kasi magkakaroon ng widespread hunger. And this because we didn't do what we had to do, what we should have done before. Pero bagamat ito na yung sinasabi natin, hindi sa pagbibintang na hindi natin ginawa yung dapat ginawa noon. Ngayon pa lang, gawin na natin ang dapat gawin. Maski na huli, no? At mauumpisahan natin. At siguro, sa darating na panahon, maaagapan natin yung kahirapan na danas ng ating mga mamamayan. We will be able to somehow alleviate the difficulties of our citizenry in the near future if we move towards this direction. What is that? Produce develop our fertilizer industry, develop our steel industry, develop our pharmaceutical industry, develop our smelting plant, and other corollary industries that have something to do with the food production and the improvement of the quality of life of our people. After all, an economic program is being implemented for what purpose? For statistical improvements like GDP? That is not the purpose. The purpose is to save human lives, to save Filipino lives. That is the purpose. And the actions that we should take now, the urgent actions we should take now, must be focused on saving human lives. And this is what we have been always saying. How do you go into these industries, steel, fertilizer? Kinakailangan mo, ang enerhiya mo ay mura. You have to have a cheap source of energy. Kung hindi ka makakagawa ng factory ng bakal. Ang factory po ng bakal gumagawa po ng ibang factories. Kinakailangan po mas mura ang ating kuryente. Paano magkakaroon ng murang kuryente kung ang humahawak ng ating power sector ay ang mga oligarko, 8 korporasyon? Sila-sila lang kumikita. Aabot ng 3, 4, ang 5 trilyon kada taon. Paano tayo We must use, katulad ng sinabi ni Itos earlier, look into Article 12, Section 17 and 18. At nagbibigay ng mandato na mag-declare ng state of emergency ang isang bansa na humaharap sa isang emergency on economics and health. And the mandate is to be able to take back the public utilities sector. Kunin ulit ng gobyerno ang kuryente, tubig, at iba pang public utilities. Bakit? Para maibaba ang halaga ng sinisingil sa taong bayan. Kasi ito ang pumapatay sa kanila ngayon. We have to take that necessary step, if you want to survive. Our economists are too cavalier. Medyo mayabang. Kakayanin natin yan. Kakayanin natin yan. Oo nga, kakayanin dahil hindi sila yung nagugutom. Hindi sila yung walang trabaho. Pero lahat ng kanilang mga patakaran ay pagtanggal sa tao sa trabaho o tataas ng pagpalawak ng kahirapan para mas maraming magugutom at mamamatay. Dahil sa kanilang paningin, kailangan bawasan ang ating populasyon. Pag mas konti ang populasyon mo, mas konti ang kinakailangan pakainin. Hindi nila iisipin kung paano papalawakin at papadamihin ang pagkain. Mas gusto nila patayin yung mga kumakain. This is one of the directions of many of our economists. They don't say it, but they act it. They will not say anything like this, that they are for depopulation. But all of their steps are directed towards increasing poverty and creating a higher rate of mortality. Yan po ang nakakalungkot. Iniintay po natin si Ma'am Diane Sare, who is our good friend from Leesburg, Virginia, but she's running as senator for the state of New York and challenging one of the oldest political icon in the state of New York. So she's got a big task in front of her. But let's see. Tingnan natin kung ano po ang ating makukuha sa kanya. At tatanungin na po natin kung ano yung kanyang programa at kung ano ang kanyang opinion tungkol dito sa mga nangyayari. Whatever is happening all around the world, it's good to learn from her. So if she's online now.
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, Diane, I can hear you now.
Okay.
And how are you, Diane?
I'm very well, thanks.
Okay, I was trying to give a brief about you, but I guess it would be better if I ask you directly what's going on now. And we know that you're running for the Senate. Could you please tell us why? And then after that, maybe we can discuss the things that are going on around the world, which affect countries like ours. So
Sure.
you go ahead, Ms. Diane Sare.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. First of all, I don't live in Leesburg, Virginia, although the Schiller Institute, with which I collaborate frequently, is based there. I live in Ramapo, New York.
New York, yeah.
And yes. So I decided actually a few years ago that Schumer had to be challenged because he's the senior enforcer, I guess you would say, in the Congress of a very destructive policy coming from the United States, which is a British imperial policy. While we successfully defeated the British in the American Revolution, it seems that a thread of their ideology has infected the United States, and we've had some presidents who fought it, like Franklin Roosevelt, Abraham Lincoln, John Quincy Adams, Kennedy, Eisenhower. But unfortunately, we've had too many administrations that seem not to know the difference between the policies and the intention of the United States and the policies of the British Empire. And Schumer is really one of these people. He's been in between the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate. He has been in Washington for 42 years. It's kind of stunning. And he, for example, just recently was one of the people forcing through the $40 billion worth of weapons and supplies to Ukraine. The Congress has not voted that we are at war with Russia. So the question is, what's the basis for the United States to do this? And should we really be surprised when we have mass shootings in the United States if we are arming people who are promoters of right-wing racist ideology in Ukraine or funding ISIS or the other things? I don't think the universe is constructed so that you can have one policy somewhere that does not ultimately come back to hurt you.
Diane, many here, of course, are aware of the incident, the mass killing that happened in New York, in Buffalo, New York, and then subsequent to that, the one in Texas. And we are also aware that the issue that the Democratic parties have been pushing is to curtail the or maybe you might want to explain this thing about the arms limitation. Could you
Well,
explain it?
they're trying to make this an issue. I think anyone who wants to talk about gun control should stop sending weapons everywhere else in the world, and then maybe we'll believe that you're serious. We have a serious cultural problem, and there's different aspects. The Buffalo shooter came from a different place, I think, psychologically than the one in Texas, although LaRouche wrote a paper way back in, was it 1999 or 2000? 1999, after the Columbine killing, where he said that the United States is going to be producing hundreds of child terrorists. One, you're taking people when they're young. Everyone can remember, no matter how old we are, we might have some memory of our adolescent years when hormones were going crazy and you're suggestible and vulnerable to propaganda and manipulation. So you target people in that age group with what? He talked about the movie Star Wars, but there are many things that try to blur the distinction between human beings and animals. So you're targeting young people. The environmentalist movement is that, right? They say human beings are just a cancerous tumor destroying the planet. Human life is bad. Just the fact that you are exhaling is hurting the environment. So you blur the distinction between man and beast, or even you say that human beings are worse than beasts. And then on top of that, you superimpose a lattice of arbitrary rules. And the rules mean, this is what the British say, the rules-based order. The rules mean that someone has to be punished. And you see this playing out with sanctions all over the world, which are just killing people. They kill. The idea is if we torture people enough, maybe we can convince them to overthrow their government. It's a pretty sick idea, and it generally doesn't work, but it sure makes a lot of people hate the United States. That kind of policy. So the combination of saying that there's rules, which are arbitrary, but it's if X, then Y, a complete linear system that has nothing to do with natural law, and you destroy the conception of man, and you will create terrorists, you will create young killers. In the case of the Buffalo killer, of course, he apparently had that black sun, that Nazi insignia on his body armor. That is the same insignia that is worn by members of the Azov battalion in Ukraine, the Nazis in Ukraine. So you have to ask the question, is there a connection? He also cited the Christchurch killer who had similar Nazi insignia, and I think was directly following the Azov battalion, maybe even had been with them. We had this Charlottesville, Virginia incident where you had people involved who actually were involved with the Azov battalion in Ukraine. So we should be, again, we should not be surprised if we are funding and promoting and participating in Nazi war crimes in other countries, that people who are perpetrating such crimes would be back in the United States or have followers, admirers, people they're communicating with in the United States.
Is this? Well, it seems like what you're saying here, people that are involved with Nazi type of activities, can they be considered as mentally deranged people? Much the same like way that that boy went into the school in Uvalde?
Well, one would think so, but the problem is the society has no standards. I mean, we have a president in this country who tells us that we should be happy to pay the extra, $2 per gallon of gasoline because it means we're torturing Russia. So where's the definition of sanity?
Yeah, I can see that. But just for your information, the cost of fuel in the Philippines by next week will be about 25% higher than that of the United States. And the people are just very worried, of course, but don't have the capability to raise their concerns to a national level. No? But that's an aside. But this thing about mass killings is concerning because we're afraid that it might be one of American exports that will hit other countries. Is that going to be possible?
I guess anything is possible. I think before that gets very widespread, we may find ourselves in thermonuclear war, and then it won't be a problem anymore. We're really on a very short fuse. And you're bringing up the hyperinflation in the Philippines as here. Actually, I think I should mention, since I'm talking to an audience that includes many people in the Philippines,
Right.
something about the U.S. electoral process. Is that all right with you? Because I think people really
Yes.
have to know.
Yes, please.
Yeah. I mean, as many people know, there were a lot of doubts and suspicions in the 2020 election. And you might recall that in 2016, when Hillary Clinton was defeated, which no one could imagine possible because the 17 US intelligence agencies worked so hard to get her elected, but she lost. But you might remember there was the big clamor about election fraud then. And what I found very amusing is when they did the voting recounts, they discovered that Hillary had even fewer votes than they thought. Everyone seems to have forgotten that. So then you get to 2020 and there's massive evidence of irregularities, shall I say, putting it diplomatically. Most of these cases were not even heard based on the evidence. But that doesn't matter because Americans know how they voted, so they have great distrust.
Yeah.
The other aspect that people are less aware of, because most people actually don't run for office themselves, and I wouldn't have been aware of this situation had I not been a candidate. But for example, in the state of New York, under the pretext of giving away matching funds to state candidates, and I am not a state candidate, I am a federal candidate, I'm a candidate for the US Senate. Right, so I'm not even eligible for these matching funds, but the incumbent politicians decided that they'd like to have $100 million more to spend on their campaigns.
Wow.
So they said, well, we really don't want to waste this money. We New York, we are so concerned about the people we represent that we would hate for the New York taxpayers' money to be used to support frivolous candidates. So we're going to protect them from spending money on frivolous candidates by tripling the requirement to get on the ballot. So a Democrat or Republican to get on the primary ballot needs 15,000 valid signatures of voters in their party across the state. An independent, such as myself, not affiliated with those parties, requires 45,000 signatures in the same amount of time, 6 weeks, which is unheard of. I learned that other states have similarly insane requirements for independent candidates. North Carolina, it's 83,000 signatures, but you can start whenever you want. You don't have to do it in a 6-week time period. And I also learned in New York, even the idea of a primary, for example, there were 4 Republican candidates who got 15,000 signatures to get on the ballot and have a primary and not just have the candidate who was rubber stamped by the party. The party itself tried to challenge them and throw them all off the ballot.
Well,
So, we claim we're the great arbiters of democracy and the so-called rule of law, but you have a total suppression of all debate in the United States. It's not even banning people from Facebook and Twitter, which they are doing, or firing any journalist who tries to tell the truth about anything going on in the world, but also in the electoral process. So some poor voter going to the polls gets there and they will see there were only 2 names on the ballot, Democrat, Republican, and they say, well, I guess I'm stuck here having to choose between the lesser of 2 evils. They have no idea there might have been a half dozen of far more qualified candidates who simply were prohibited from getting onto the ballot.
well, this, as you said, was only a new, a recent requirement by the electoral process in the United States. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, for the state
But-
of New York. Yeah.
The objective, therefore, is to try to limit the candidates to those that are already chosen, pre-chosen
Right.
by
Right.
the by the gods.
Yes, the self-appointed gods.
Okay, but in your case, you needed, as you said, 45,000 signatures. Were you able to get the 45,000 signatures?
Yes, I was. And I think I was the only one who was from it's public access. Anyone can look at the petitions that were submitted. And the other ones that I saw had many, many problems, some worse than others. But I did it, and I would say that no one should ever have to do it again. It reminds me of that poem by Schiller, The Glove, where Mr.
Yeah.
Kunigun or whatever her name is throws the glove into the lions. There's a Colosseum and the lions are eating the Christians or something.
Right.
So the valiant knight jumps in, rescues the glove, gives it to her, and says, "Forget it. I'm not interested in you, and I'm never going to do this again." In a sense, that this was horrible. People had to put in horrible hours. We had one person who got sick with COVID, actually, because you're intersecting crowds. They were at a large festival in that case, even though it was outdoors, but maybe she was just more vulnerable. I don't know. We had people who lost their jobs because they were putting in the hours to get me on the ballot. And we had maybe close to 200 volunteers.
Well, okay. But if you've got 45,000 signatures, that means you've got 45,000 in your network campaigning for you right there in the state of New York. Don't you think so? Because these are people obviously committed, not just because of political party affiliation, but precisely because of the ideas which you espouse.
Well, it's not necessarily, although you're right, actually, I would say you are, because the signing means you support someone's right to be on the ballot, even though you may or may not agree with that person. We did have a couple, not too many, a couple Schumer supporters were honest enough to say, well, I do think there should be a debate. I do think he should have to answer questions of why he supported the Iraq War, for example, and so on. But you're right, in that sense, we intersected hundreds of thousands of people. There were people who were very supportive, but for one reason or another didn't want to sign the petition to put me on the ballot. Some of it out of fear. A lot of people are afraid that it's such a police state, people are going to trace their signature or something.
Everybody's paranoid nowadays.
Yes.
But at least your name is going to be on the ballot.
Well, cross your fingers. There's still, the challenge deadline was Friday, a couple days ago, but if they mailed it in and it was postmarked by Friday, so we'll know for sure by Tuesday at 5 o'clock. I
Uh-huh.
think if they try to challenge me, it will be frivolous because we did really an incredible job and my petitions are beautiful.
Uh-huh.
But so far, we have not been challenged. So Tuesday at 5, we'll know for sure.
Well, do you feel that the candidates, well, Schumer, obviously will not want to have to debate with you, but the Republican candidate, who might it be, and wouldn't he be at least uh, cooperative with you being there?
He really, I met him and I think he doesn't exist. His name is Joe Pinion. I call him No Pinion. He has a website with no policy, no program whatsoever. And I think this is part of the deal between the two parties is to keep Schumer in there. So
Uh-huh.
the Republicans never run a serious challenger.
I see. But this will be to your advantage, I hope, if you get into the ballot. And you said Schumer was there for 40 years. You mean he was federal states senator for 40 years? Are there
He was
no time, term
term limit?
limits? Yeah.
No, a lot of Americans want that. I'm not sure I really support that. I think we need a different kind of campaign finance reform. I actually think there should be spending limits. We have donation limits, but the spending on campaigns is obscene. And to give you a sense of how the US government became really an aristocracy, if you run for federal office, no one is allowed by law to give more, and this year it's $2,900 per election cycle to a given candidate.
Uh-huh.
So no one is allowed to give me more than $2,900. However, there's a giant loophole, which is that the candidate may spend unlimited amount on their own campaign.
Mhm.
So,
Unlimited.
yeah. So if the candidate is a billionaire, they can spend $1 billion. A candidate who's not a billionaire will not be able to compete.
Yes. So it's rigged towards their side, and for them to stay there. And the
Yeah.
laws that are being made actually are made to favor them to be able to stay there. It's like passing laws to arrogate to themselves pork barrel of X million dollars a year. Is that
Yeah. Yeah.
is that possible in the U.S. Legislature that they arrogate pork barrel of $10 million each or something like that?
Well, I don't know how they do it. I think now most of the representatives make their money in deals with lobbyists and they all become consultants and they get, it's certainly not in their pay. The pay of a federal representative hasn't increased in about 10 years.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, I had a funny conversation because, you know, I'm sure you know, as the political organizer and classical musician, my husband and I don't have a very big income. We were not interested in that, right? So to me, the income of a congressman seems pretty substantial, but nowadays with the inflation, it's not so much. I think it's $174,000. So, but I had a meeting with someone who said, I thought this, it hadn't even occurred to me. He said they actually should pay federal representatives much more money because people who are smart, who want to make money, who have, you know, who are talented or particularly exceptional and they want to have a deep, you know, high standard of living or whatever, they'll never become representatives. They won't become representatives because they won't get paid for it. They'd rather do something else. That was a thought, but I think congressmen make tons of money on consulting and all that other stuff, or they make it after they leave. There's all kinds of backroom deals, bribes. Certainly the money is not in the official payroll.
Okay, what do you see to be the outcome of the November elections and the effects on the present administration, considering that Biden is now on the 20% approval rating? Is there a possibility of him being taken out of office?
I don't know. Certainly, if the elections were to occur right now, the Democratic Party would take a real beating. And that's not because the Republican Party is any good. That's the problem with the party system.
Yeah.
But I fear that if the trajectory that we're on is moving very, very close to a nuclear war. I mean, how can you have the United States supply? I don't know what people think. When we are supplying the Ukrainian military, which is embedded with Nazis, weapons, which we're supposedly taking their word that they're not going to use them to launch strikes inside Russian territory.
Yeah,
Or
right.
when the head of, this general or Admiral Nakasone says publicly in an interview that we are launching regular cyber warfare against Russia. These are acts of war. The US is already engaged in acts of war against Russia. So what do Americans expect? What does the world expect? The British are even worse in a way. They don't have the same capability as we do, but what they do have, they're providing it like crazy. And Boris Johnson, anytime Zelensky starts to go limp or might even consider negotiating, Boris Johnson is right there to make sure that no such negotiations occur.
Uh-huh. Well, if they actually push Putin into using nuclear weapons, in Ukraine, I assume, of course, that will be the signal for a retaliation by NATO and the United States. If that's the case, then we're really talking of a global war, because almost immediately, I suppose, China will participate in it. Is that the way you see it as well?
Well, I think it's very, very unlikely that Russia would use nuclear weapons first, although they have said if they feel that their very existence is threatened, that is an option. The United States is the only nation on the planet thus far that has used nuclear weapons, so I think the risk there is great, especially given the delusional quality of some of our so-called leadership. There's also the possibility of this being launched in error, a mistake, once you get to this kind of level of tensions and armaments. So I just think it's exceedingly dangerous. And then if you compound the situation with created, we're not short of fuel. It's arbitrary shortages are being created, driven by certain financial interests. But suppose you start rationing diesel fuel. Well, the United States has no rail system. It's totally broken down. So all of our food and everything in the country is transported by truck.
Yeah.
Well, if that stops, I mean, this may be a news flash to some people, but food does not grow on your grocery store shelf.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you run, and of course we expect you to win, because Schumer is a Democrat, and obviously he may not have the electorate behind him this time. What would be among your priorities? How do you plan to go into and influence the Senate? Because we'd like you to be able to run the Senate, the whole thing, and influence them, because like you said, nobody's doing thinking over there.
Right. Yeah, they're too busy smoking pot or something. And that is a big problem in Washington, I'm afraid. Everywhere in the country is drug use. But look, the first issue is the economy. And to deal with that, you really have to have the major powers, as Lyndon LaRouche always said, the US, Russia, China, India. I actually think, I don't know now how it would be, but I had a sense some other nations like Japan might be interested in joining. But the US, minimally the US, Russia, China, US, Russia, China, India, you have to put this whole system through bankruptcy reorganization. We have to wipe out the derivatives bubble, but at the same time, you have to protect the people, which is why every nation should have a kind of a Glass-Steagall bank separation with that firewall up, so you're protecting people's savings while you wipe out all the speculative garbage.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this makes people very nervous. It reminds me of the famous Malaysian monkey trap, which I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah, you
Right,
can't
but-
get out. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. You grab the nut inside this cage, and once your fist is that big, you can't pull it out again. Well, if people are going to be that obsessed with their stock market investments, then you're going to lose everything while you're clinging to that. Whereas if you would just say, because the price of everything is out of control. It used to be the case that a person working at a minimum wage job could pay their rent or their mortgage with 1 week's pay. People can't even imagine that now. People are spending 50 to 75, even 80% or more of their income simply on housing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you mentioned something about, you mentioned the four power concept of Lyndon LaRouche of the four nations getting together, the United States, China, Russia, and India. Now, that was a kind of an ideal situation. But the events right now has pushed the United States in diametrically opposed to Russia. But the economic sanctions that have been imposed on Russia by US and the NATO and some other countries, I suppose, has pushed Russia into working together with China and demanding that all those that want Russian oil, they must be ready to pay in rubles. Is this not another way of pushing to change the system, wherein it's China, India, and Russia that might be involved, that might take the lead on this, and the conception of the new financial system can be made, no? As other countries start feeling the pinch on the collapse of the financial system, and of course the high cost of fuel and so on and so forth. We'd like to think in this way, rather than, of course, just giving up and saying there's going to be a world war. What do you think?
Well, I think, unfortunately, I think this will not ultimately work unless the United States can be shifted. This is a huge job. It's the responsibility of the American people. And that's, in a sense, really the main reason why I'm running, is to provide a standard of leadership, because the American people are very unhappy. You know, there's been all these demonstrations about this and that, usually on smaller matters like mandates or, you know, other kinds of things that people are unhappy about. One interesting thing is you have a lot of young people actually organizing unions against major corporations like Amazon and Starbucks. That's a little bit of a more interesting trend, but people generally think too small. And what they think they want is too small. It's actually beneath the dignity of man. So I think that we have to get people in the Western nations, in the United States in particular, to have an image, to actually think about what the world should look like 50 years from now and 100 years from now. How should people be living? You were talking about energy density, like nuclear power. This is absolutely crucial, for example.
Yeah.
What do you want your children to be working on? Should they be obsessed with what gender they are, or should they be learning how to develop fusion, or how to cure Parkinson's or cancer, or how to grow vegetables on Mars, or these kind of things, which would really fascinate young people. So it's true what Sergei Glaziev is doing, the Eurasian Economic Union, the moves to peg the ruble to gold, China and Russia, they're doing this out of necessity, and it's a correct policy. And that for the short term, it will mitigate the intended destructive effects of the sanctions from the West. But ultimately, unless the United States changes, you have probably 1 billion people facing death by starvation. And we're not going to be able to get this to work. So the role of the United States is going to be critical, and it really depends on the American people. And the American people recognizing that perhaps our allies are the people that they've taught us to hate so much, namely Vladimir Putin, Xi
Yeah.
Jinping,
Yeah.
other leaders.
Yeah. Well, it's sad because the only alternative to, as of now, we're facing a real crisis, world crisis, and the only alternative change that U.S. is facing is to change Biden. And then who do you have? You've got Kamala Harris. Or even if you change Biden, Kamala Harris, and you've got Trump coming into the picture, you're not too sure exactly how he's going to go either. No? Although during his term, he did make some steps towards personally talking to North Korea, China, and even Putin. But in this case, it seems that it's much the connection between these countries have been more and more disparate, and we know what we have to do. We know what is needed, but we also know that we're farthest from it as of now, unless some other miracle happens that will push the U.S. into that four power alliance, no? And they should stop. They should stop trying to block the development of the BRI, and common sense will show you that that's the direction. But of course, we just look at the United States to bring us towards that period of prosperity, or now we're seeing the United States as bringing the world to war. We're very happy that we have somebody like you as a senator, and would probably win, and know very well that there should be some greater influence of right thinking in the Senate. But realistically, how do you convince the political leadership in the U.S. to do what is right? What do you think?
Well, again, this is not merely facetious. I do think that drug use is a really big problem. because it impairs people's ability to think rationally. And it's a huge problem, particularly in the wake of the isolation and what people went through during the height of the pandemic. The drug use, alcohol use massively increased in this country. Again, I think the change, I could be wrong. I would wish that I were wrong in some ways, but I think the change is going to have to be more coming from a cultural shift where the population begins to have an idea of what they really want, that our nation has to do better, that we have to know something about what's going on in the world. One thing that's very interesting in the various organizations that I've been addressing, many of which were supporters of Trump, they are not fooled by this Russia-Ukraine situation. Also, a lot of people on the so-called left, the actual real liberals, as FDR might have considered himself a liberal, not this fascist liberal that we have, also are very well aware of the Nazi background of the Azov battalion and what we're doing in Ukraine. They know the history. I found at one of the meetings I spoke, there was even an American woman wearing a Russian flag on her lapel. I've talked to American patriots, military veterans who have said things like, I really feel like running out and putting a Russian flag on my front lawn. We have all these Ukrainian flags, and it's terrible for the people of Ukraine. They want peace like anyone else. They voted overwhelmingly for Zelensky because they thought that maybe he would bring about the Minsk Accords so that the fighting could stop.
Yeah.
But since they did not eradicate, and really I think the CIA and other agencies were funding and aiding the Nazi faction, then you really could not get peace. The role the United States could have and should have played was to help to facilitate the Minsk Accords. That is, if we wanted to reverse the policy of our own administration from the Obama-Biden years where we overthrew that government. And of course, you probably know that the Russian Duma has now requested that Victoria Nuland come and testify in Russia about the bioweapons laboratories that she has admitted exist. They said they don't really expect her to testify, but the world is very interested in knowing on what was going on at these laboratories and whether the United States is going to comply with any of the international laws on proliferation of chemical and biological weapons.
Yeah, that was surprising that Victoria Nuland actually admitted that there were. Well, I was not that surprised. I was telling my son Nitos that Victoria Nuland in 2014 actually admitted that she spent $5 billion taking out the president of Ukraine at that time and putting in all of these terrorists in government. I remember a whole building they supposedly put on fire, knowing very well that there were people inside the building during that tumultuous period.
Odessa.
Yeah,
In Odessa, you mean, where they burned the anti-coup demonstrators?
right.
Yeah, they burned them alive. The Azov battalion herded them into a building, boarded it up, and if people tried to jump out the windows, they shot them.
Yeah, these are the type of people that the U.S. is helping to go against Russia. Now, going back to the United States, Diane, is the U.S. capable? You're talking of a cultural change that will be hoping that the people will soon wake up to realize that that's what needs to be done. Is the U.S. capable now of a revolution? And I'm not talking about just the people. This is the U.S. in general. That means including all the sectors and the military.
Well, that's a good question. I think we better be, or we're not going to survive, and mankind is not going to survive. You know, Mr. LaRouche used to make these forecasts warning. In fact, I found just the other day, I was looking through some material from years back, 10 years ago, when I was running for US Congress in New
Yeah.
Jersey. And Mr. LaRouche participated by video in a town hall meeting. And he said if Obama is not removed from office, we are facing thermonuclear war.
Yeah.
Now, you could say, oh, well, that was an exaggeration, but here we are today, and you see it was not an exaggeration at all.
Yeah.
We had a reprieve because we had 4 years of Trump, who, among, various shortcomings he may have had, he did not start any new wars.
Yeah.
He did talk with Putin. He came very close to ending the Korean War officially, and that was very directly sabotaged.
Yeah.
So I think the American people really want this. There's a case, this young, not that young guy actually, but a fellow named Jeff Young, Geoff, Jeffrey Young, who just won the Democratic primary for Congress in Kentucky. Are you familiar with him?
No, I'm sorry.
It's interesting because he has known about LaRouche's work for many years. I think he has certain disagreements on the green and other things, but he ran a campaign with big billboards calling for banning the CIA, and he also sent out a fundraising letter telling people they should stop funding Nazis in Ukraine.
Yeah.
He won the Democratic primary.
Oh, okay. Democratic primary. Huh? Okay. So
Yeah.
you still have right-thinking people there.
Yeah, and people respond, right? People responded to someone telling the truth.
All right. Right. Yeah. Well, the reason I was asking about the capable of a revolution, because and I have asked this also of certain other people. I received the response that this is most likely not going to happen because it's not in the Constitution, or it is not in the nature of the United States. Basically, I was thinking of whether there are right-thinking people in the military who might want to save the U.S. and save the world, no, from a deranged president who wants to push the button. No? Is that possible? Are there
Well,
are there
I
are there
keep
sectors
wondering,
there?
right, where are such people? And I also have to say that Biden is probably not the worst, although, apparently LaRouche used to always call him D-Biden because he seems to speak out of both sides of his mouth. On the one hand, like he did immediately get the START treaty extended, when he came in. So on the one hand, you think he does want to avoid nuclear war. He keeps saying that we're not going to send ground troops, although we are there. But I think other people are far worse, and maybe names we don't know, some names we do know, like Admiral Richard, head of the Strategic Command, who says now nuclear war is likely. So, we have had some courageous whistleblowers like William Binney, like Ed Snowden, Chelsea Manning. You've had some people, and I think this is very American, actually, courageously come forward to prevent disaster or to speak out because something so badly goes against their conscience. And that I am wondering about. Where are these people? Will they do something? And when I say revolution, to be clear, I don't think it will come in the form of some kind of like a coup or anything like that. I mean a revolution in thinking. There has to be a transformation to a much higher level of the thinking of the American people. And I think it's only in such times of crisis that such a thing even has the potential of occurring. And ironically, it may be the very policy that we use to bring about regime change, that is sanctions on other countries, which cause people to starve and be susceptible to an uprising. Well, we're now imposing those very policies on the American people.
Right.
And so if you have leadership, as I am trying to provide, and others, we have another LaRouche affiliated candidate in Texas, Joel DeJean, running for Congress, then perhaps the population is going to be much, much more susceptible of fighting for these profound ideas. And I think that's our hope. It's not a guarantee. It's hard to predict, was the population of East Germany, of East Berlin, totally elevated and sublime prior to the wall coming down? Probably not. But the economic collapse and the fact they had some kernels in their culture of Friedrich Schiller and Beethoven allowed them for a moment to do something really noble and really elevated. And in the United States, we don't particularly, we have certain things in classical culture and poetry and music, but our real contribution to culture in the world is the political culture of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
So will Americans draw on that better aspect of our identity and do something noble? That's the question.
Yes. And of course, may I add that the rest of the world, the Philippines included, is hoping and expecting the United States to precisely get to that state of being able to uphold their constitution and the declarations of independence, because that is your legacy to the whole world. And we look forward. At this point, we want to do our bit, but our bit is stays there until the major powers actually get together to do what is good for mankind. The four-power advocacy and as presented by Lyndon LaRouche is the most ideal, of course. And you could see that if that happens, then that would be a tremendous change for the better for mankind. But maybe we have to pass through the crucible before such things develop, and maybe we may have to pass through a war. By the way, Diane, I don't know if you recall, 10 years ago, I interviewed you when you were running for Congress in New Jersey.
Yes. Yeah.
You remember that time?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and in the same program. And also, I want to let you know that this little tete-a-tete that we're having is being broadcast nationwide with our radio station, DZXL, which is often simulcast in New York, because there is a DZXL office in New York. So we have Filipino listeners in New York. And maybe you might want to address them before we let you go, to explain what they can expect and how they can participate in getting you elected as into the Senate.
Great. Well, thank you. Yes, I would like to definitely address them. I mean, everybody in the world, of course, is important to this fight for humanity. If you're in New York, then you have the opportunity to do more with regards to my campaign. And my website is SARE for Senate, which is S like Sam, AREFOR, the word for Senate, sareforsenate.com. You can sign up to get my emails. You can sign up to volunteer. For people in the U.S. who can easily call my campaign headquarters, the number is 646-328-1932. 646-328-1932. I'd love to.
Let me repeat that slowly, Diane.
Okay.
Again, please, slowly, and so that our people will get it. Okay, may ano mo ba? Malagay mo ba sa screen? Can you put it on the screen?
Sareforsenate.com.
Sareforsenate.com. Sareforsenate.com.
Right. And Sare is spelled S-A-R-E.
SAREFOR.com. For Senate.
Yes, sareforsenate.com.
And then the telephone number is
646-328-1932.
646-328-9432.
1932. Yeah, I picked that number. It's the year that FDR got elected.
Oh, yeah. Okay, pwede mo ba lagay sa screen? We're trying to get our technical to get it on the screen. Yeah, and go ahead. What else you wanted to say?
Well, presumably I'll be on the ballot, and we need people to volunteer. I'm also available to do interviews in the United States. I've been running all over the state, from Long Island to Buffalo, up to St. Lawrence County, down to Lower Manhattan, everywhere. And there is a movement here. I've intersected a number of independent candidates who are running for reasons similar to myself. Most of them, other than my colleague Joel DeJean, don't have the privilege of having worked with Lyndon LaRouche for several decades or a few decades.
Yeah.
So they don't maybe know how to implement what they imagine should be done, but their heart is in the right place, their intention is in the right place.
Mhm.
And I find it fascinating, just like this upset where Jeff Young won his primary.
Mhm.
I think there's a great deal of potential in this election. But again, we need the big ideas. We need the big ideas. We can't settle for something halfway.
Mhm. That's right. Okay. Well, as Lyndon LaRouche said, we've got to think outside of the fishbowl, or else we just keep on going in circles, trying to solve new problems in the same old way, not realizing that the fishbowl is being brought to be flushed into the toilet.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we wish you the very best, Diane, and there it is. We have it on our screen. Sareforsenator.com, 646-328-1932. This will be shown on YouTube and Facebook as well. So it will be archived. So for people that want to be able to view the interview, they will be able to see it later on.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's really a pleasure seeing you again. I would hope sometime soon we'll meet in person somehow.
Right. Well,
because
things permitting, either here or there, we'll soon see each
Right.
other. Yeah. Bye-bye, Diane. And
thank you so much.
more power to you and good luck.
Thank you.
Sige. Yung music. Okay, anong oras na ba? Saan si Itos? Hindi ko na narinig si Itos. Did you want to ask anything more, Itos, that I missed?
No. Okay naman lahat. The question, same questions naman for her.
Uh,
It was good. It's good watching her and seeing that there are people still fighting for within the American system, presidential system, and their political system, that the group of LaRouche
Mm.
and like-minded people are still fighting for their country.
yeah.
Running with no funds, just volunteers, and just the idea,
Mm.
the big ideas that they have. So it's nice to see.
Well, sa atin dito, gusto ko lang sana maramdaman ng ating mga tagapakinig na etong problema natin ay hindi atin lang. This is a global problem. And you can see based on what yung sinabi ni Diane Sare na ang kung gaano kalala yung problema at siya na mismong nagsasabi na mismong Amerika ang nagtutulak sa Ukraine na matuloy ang giyera. Ito ang napakabigat. Kasi habang tinutulak ng Amerikano ang Ukraine, kasi pag binibigyan mo ng armas ang Ukraine, lalo na ngayon, bibigyan daw nila ng rockets. These rockets are no longer defensive weapons. These rockets can be used as offensive weapons and will be able to reach the Kremlin. Pag nangyari yan, hindi natin alam kung paano magre-react si Putin. Ang nakakatakot, baka pag sinugod niya na husto at ubusin na yung Ukraine, mapipilitan ng bansang Amerika na siya na ang kailangan humarap sa Russia. At pag nagharap yan dalawang yan, dito na ang umpisa ng talagang malawakan gera. Sa kasalukuyan, sinasabi nga ni Diane Sare na kandidato siya sa pagkasenado for federal state of New York. Ang sabi niya, we are already in World War III. Nag-umpisa na. Itong nakikita natin gera sa Ukraine, itong nakikita natin mga positioning, ganyan. Nag-umpisa na yung gera. At hindi lang yung banatan sa mga bomba, pagbobomba sa Ukraine. Ang nagkakaroon ng major economic dislocation ang mga bansa. Kanya nyo nararanasan itong nangyayari ngayon sa pagtaas ng halaga ng bilihin dahil taas ng langis at gasolina at marami pang iba ng deterioration ng US dollar. Alam nyo po, yung ruble pa nga ang lumalakas. Ang bumabagsak sa halaga, yung dollar. No? Kasi marami nang bumibili ng ruble. Yung ruble po, yan yung pera ng Russia. Bakit ka mo? Kasi kailangan nilang bumili ng langis. At napakahirap bumili ng langis ngayon sa ibang bansa, sa Saudi, sa Middle East, kasi doon nakatutok lahat ng mga Western oil companies. At kung yun ang nag-service ng lahat ng pangangailangan, ang pinakamalaking hinihigop ng langis na galing sa Saudi at iba pang lugar ay ang Amerika. Bumabagsak ang supply available to countries like ours. So pagbagsak ng supply, tumataas ang presyo. Mas mahal ang bili natin. Hindi naman tayo makabili ng oil ng Russia dahil wala tayong ruble. Kasi pagbibili ka ng oil, kailangan bubukas ka ng letter of credit sa mga Western banks. Wala naman tayong connect sa mga Russian banks. So pag Western banks ang kadil mo, they will not open a letter of credit denominated in ruble, in Russian ruble, because they will not transact with Russia. So that is where we are. So we are caught in the middle of all of this, and we had not prepared for this situation, and we should have. Because as early as 2-3 years ago, maybe even more, we saw this brewing already. Nakikita na natin na pausbong na to. Maski na nung as early as panahon ni Lyndon LaRouche nung buhay pa siya, maybe more than 10 years ago, sinasabi na niya, magkakaroon ng gera dito. At yung Ukraine na yan. Kasi yung Ukraine, pugad ng mga Nazi. Yung Nazi, mga pasista. Yung mga nandyan na Ukrainians, sila ang kumampi dun sa mga kay Hitler noon na kumalaban sa Russia. Yan ang ginawang kakampi ng bansang Amerika para gawin pang-udyok sa Russia. Ito na ngayon ang sitwasyon natin. Nakakatakot. Kanya kung ikaw ang nasa kasalukuyan administrasyon ni Bongbong Marcos, nakakakilabot ang napakalaking problema. Hindi nyo po, I think no one can fathom, no one can even describe the magnitude of the crisis that our country will face or is going to face in the near future. Nagugulat ako dito sa mga ekonomista. Kaya natin yan. Kaya yung utang, kaya this. Kasi sa kanila, nandun lang sila sa kanilang opisina, nagko-compute ng GDP. Pero yung mga mamamayang Pilipino, nagugutom at namamatay. I hope it does not reach the level that it can reach. I hope in the process, our administration is able to master the intellectual capacity and the moral courage to do what is right. And there are steps that we can take in order to push to save the lives of our people and to save the nation as a whole. But we need the moral courage to do it. look at Article 12, Section 17 and 18. That is the first step towards recovery and eventually towards development. And this one I strongly advise to all you people, whether you are an economist or not, all you people that are connected or can reach the leaders of our country. Tell them, please look into Article 12, Section 17 and 18. It gives the leader the mandate to declare a state of emergency, to take back and control public utilities such as energy, water, and telecommunications, so that rates that they are charged to the people can be dropped dramatically to a level where they can at least feel and survive and improve their purchasing power, to a level where the businesses are able to generate enough capital, enough more resources to be able to continue providing jobs to the people. Only then will you see the cycle of economic process start again. Right now, it is already going to start slowing down. And more people are going to feel the pains of hunger. And sad to say, although I wish this government the very best and I pray that they succeed, sad to say we have not yet announced or articulated the necessary steps that it needs to take to save our people and to save our nation. Maraming salamat po. Dito po magwawakas ang ating programa. In the meantime, baka meron ba tayong mga text messages?
Yeah, sige. Babasahin ko na yung mga text messages natin. Again, these text messages do not reflect the opinions of the host, and we are just going to read them as is for in the interest of public information. Okay, CJ Lahora Biniluz, watching from Cainta. Shout out po kay Guanin Vic Sumatra. Good evening po, Sir Butch Valdes. Nina Web, mabuhay po tayong lahat in the next generation. Nina Web, thank you, Sir Butch. Carlo EY, good evening. Sana mapanood dito sa PTV. Philip John Santander, watching from Santa Cruz, Manila. Boy Dolchan, great work, Sir Butch and Sir Itos. Luchi Melchor, gandang gabi po. Nice to see you again po. Mildred Jacinto Naco, good evening po. Melda Salvacion Makadat, good evening po. Polinario Mabayat, good evening. Waglison B. Nitz, good evening. Oliver Gervasio, good evening po. Cesar Soberano, good evening. Chairman Prof. Butch Valdes and Ito. Attorney Bangawel, good evening, Chairman Butch Valdes and Itos. Sun Chi, good evening po. Attorney Bangawel, do you recommend Professor Valdes anybody for the position of Energy Secretary? Chairman?
Well, there are somebody is congressman now, but I would look at Marco Wangco to be in a good position. But there are others like Marcoleta might be a good person to head the Department of Energy, no? Because he knows who the enemies of the state are, no? And he knows how to scrutinize, and this is what I don't know him personally, but I think he would be a good it would be a good decision to get him because it will define the direction of our administration.
Yeah, I'd just like to add, no, the energy position, Department of Energy, has to be considered in light of what the intention of the country will be for this administration and the next administration. So, what do we want to happen with in terms of our energy and economic development, because that is tied closely together. So, mas maganda po na i-articulate na ni Presidente Marcos ang kanyang polisiya in terms of energy and economic. Saan tayo pupunta in light of in light of what's happening in the world and here in the Philippines? Anong gagawin natin? Because that will determine which your choice for energy secretary. Else,
Correct.
you will just choose a manager tulad ng yung dating energy secretary, si Pusi, na wala namang ginawa.
Hindi
And
lang
the ones for him.
hindi
So,
lang si Kusi Itos, pati si Petilla, yung dati kay Noynoy Aquino, no? Lahat sila mukhang sa aking palagay bayaran ng mga may hawak sa power sector, no?
Yeah.
At hindi nila ginawa ng paraan para protektahin ng taong bayan. Kanya sila inupo doon para protektahan ng interes ng mga oligarko, no? Yan
So-
ang nangyari. Kanya dapat ang unang-unang interes ang titignan ng ng secretary at ng presidente ay yung kapakanan ng taong bayan. At walang ibang dapat ilabas na bagong programa, kundi idagdag natin ang Nuclear Energy Development Program sa kanyang program of infrastructure.
okay. From Vilma Robeck Pratt, Marcos loyalist watching from Germany. Philip Doleta, good evening, professor watching from Iloilo. Rabbi Kid Stories, like, comment. Red Me, Marcos loyalist, Phil, I'm from Dallas, Texas, USA. Red Me, stop the U.S. support of Ukraine war. Ukrainian government are controlled by Nazis. Exactly, Russia is not the enemy. It's Ukrainian government Nazis. Our biggest enemy is Federal Reserve lobbyists. Eliminate NATO and have dialogue with Russia, China, India. Agree. Joan Undoy, wow, congrats Sir Butch. Mga Goy Bisli, Brandon, full support to Ukraine because that's where quid pro quo happened and will happen again after the war. Jacques Vivas, don't manipulating and maliciousing the AFP, all baboy. Look in any angle, all of you who are wrong. All your plan and all your data reported in Berta. Don't kidding, white elk, bakalan and order of Illuminati. Yeah, that's true. Dudurugin namin kayo, order Illuminati is the bakala. Roch Almazor, good evening, Sir Butch and Sir Ito. Sampuhay po kayo. Cecilia Layugan, good evening po, Sir Butch and Company, listening from Bulacan. Attorney Banga Oil, good luck, Miss Diane Sare. Algo, may God bless your efforts in the Senate, Miss Diane Sare. Nathaniel Victorino, mananalo yan, Diane Sare, for Senate US. Ma'am, thank you for sharing information. Attorney Magoel, good luck, Ms. Diane Sare. International analysts say the U.S. Army is reluctant to challenge the Russian forces. U.S. has no war experience worth speaking of since the Korean War. Fredio Redina present. Fredio Redina, is the background Is the background the BRI railroad system? Yes, I think that's the background of chairman na ginamit ni Bear. Belt and Road.
This is the this background is the Eurasian Land Bridge uh, plan of the LaRouche organization, which we feel, because this came out in 1988-89, this might be the precursor of the concept of the BRI by China, because this Eurasian Land Bridge project concept was presented by Helga Zepp LaRouche in 1995 to different universities in China. When she went on tour, lecture tour in China at that time, Beijing and Shanghai. So when she presented this was called the Eurasian Land Bridge. Land bridge because by rail and by land connecting the 7 continents of the world. No? So palagay namin, baka after the lecture, pinag-aralan nila at gumawa sila ng Belt and Road Initiative, no? Which is very, very close to this Eurasian Land Bridge presentation.
Okay, Diane Lorque. Good evening, Diane. If I were PBBM, President Bongbong Marcos, I will now take over all public utilities regardless of how our economists behind BBM oppose it. The sovereign people must be followed and no other. Yes, I would add the sovereign interest and will of the people must be followed. Freddy Oradina, will PBBM handle the DA? I'm not sure what you meant, Freddy. How would he handle?
DA is the Department of Agriculture.
Yeah, I don't know what he meant by the question. Will President Bongbong handle the DA? I don't know.
Well, I have a feeling that Bongbong Marcos will move away from dependence for our food from imports. This is by his own thinking and by necessity. He will have to move away from food imports because the imports will become more and more and more expensive. In the same light, he should move very quickly into food production here. And you can't go into major food production unless you have the basic infrastructure, which is energy and water. No? And by energy, we mean, to start with, restarting the nuclear power plant, and subsequent to that, constructing a nuclear power desalination plant, which will provide an irrigation for the whole of Central Luzon and upwards towards Pangasinan. That is what the Bataan nuclear power plant is capable of. Not just producing electricity at a very cheap price, but also to provide irrigation, potable water by a nuclear power desalination plant. The earlier we get into that, the better. No? And the faster we're able to alleviate the hunger of our people.
Okay, Raf XV, Chairman Butch, forever you will always be a guiding light, truth for Filipinos. Mabuhay, Katie. Mujer Bonita, watching from Japan po. Redby, there are already US fighting in Ukraine. Ukrainians are not fighting it by themselves. Randy Castillo, good evening, Sir Butch and Ito. As proxy war na nangyayari sa Ukraine. Red me, yes. Destroy oligarchs such as Meralco. Destroy Manny Pangilinan. Allow fair competition regarding water, electricity, and telecommunication. Yes, Marcoleta. Destroy Pangilinan Lopez. Granny 68, may ng English, mali, naubusan ng Tagalog. Redmi Ayala and other oligarchy. And Redmi, which article are you referring to? Within the Philippines, are you referring to again, please, regarding basic necessities?
No, the Article 12 is in our Constitution. Sa ating pong saligang batas, Artikulo 12, Section 17 and 18. Basahin niyo po, Artikulo 12, Section 17 and 18 sa ating saligang batas. Napakadali po ang ibig sabihin doon, no? Ang sinasabi, ang gobyerno daw kailangan kunin ang pagpapatakbo at kontrol ng mga public utilities katulad ng kuryente at tubig at telecom para ibaba ang halaga ng sinisingil nila sa tao at sa mga negosyo. Dahil ito ay importante. Ito ang unang hakbang sa aming palagay para sa economic survival ng ating bansa. At mag-uumpisa buhat dyan ang programa ng economic development. Article 12, Section 17 and 18 ng ating Constitution. Tignan niyo po.
Okay, Freddy Oredina sa Senado, ang hawak ng energy ay PONI MVP. Taka ang marami paano nanalo ito pinakmakan ni Pao Chief. Mujer Bonita watching from Japan po, Raf XP. When Jasara Nesara was about to be launched the day after, it was 9/11. Again, Jasara Nesara is about to launch again. Will the DS be desperate again to do something stupid again? Okay, those are all the questions for tonight.
Okay. Maraming salamat po. Tangalan po ng ating mga katipon dito sa ating katipunan at sa magagaling na staff ng DCXL Radio Mo Nationwide. Kami po ay pansamantalang nagpapaalam at nagpapasalamat na sinamahan niyo kami ngayon, ang ora de peligro ng ating bayan at ng buong mundo dito po sa ating katipunan. Hanggang sa linggo po muli, mga katipon, 7 to 9 p.m. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Okay.